Fpyq Jiang. Chapter 15. Those who have left. While Qi Nikan used a servant girl's hand for support, tears clung to her lashes. Once she reached Qi Yunruo's bedside, she cried until her sobs could no longer be heard. As she held Qi Yunruo's hand, her voice carried sorrow. How could this happen? Li Chen set aside the empty bowl of medicine. He took his time saying, "The princess consort is far into pregnancy. It's better not to stay so close lest you also get sick. Let's all leave. We should not wake little Qi up." "Yes," said Qi Nikan. At first, she waited for Li Chen to take the initiative to support her outside. But Li Chen left by himself. Her heart tightened at that moment, and as she shifted her gaze toward Qi Yunruo, her eyes flashed with ill will. Qi Nikan followed Li Chen outside to the outer study. Sat down on a chair. Li Chen asked, "Does the princess consort know what caused this situation?" It was this concubine's fault. Younger brother was too stubborn and did not allow this concubine to interfere. This concubine listened to what he had said and did as told. From the start, that consort Ji was not a person easy to communicate with. This concubine should not have. How does the princess consort think this situation should be resolved? Li Chen interrupted her somewhat impatiently. Qi Nikan sat there, shocked. Then she said, "This concubine feels that consort Ji and my younger brother are both to blame. As people who live together in the same household, fighting too much isn't good." Li Chen grunted in acknowledgement. "How will your highness handle what had occurred?" Li Chen responded by calling for Su Ji. He then ordered Su Ji to report every detail he had been privy to. Following that, both Su Ji and Lulan described all of Qi Yunruo's actions and all of Eunuch Xia's words. Then Li Chen glanced at Qi Nikan. "This sly slave! How dare he insult his master," said Qi Nikan. To lie and hide the truth from his superiors, even if he were beaten to death, it wouldn't be enough. Li Chen said, "In the estate, currently the princess consort and consort Wei are with child. They cannot do or see any violent things for this reason, lest we bring forth bad fortune. Su Ji, have that eunuch Xia receive 20 strikes of the rod. Afterward, send him to Tapu Temple to feed the horses. This slave will do as commanded." Li Chen rubbed his forehead. For a moment, Qi Nikan was rendered speechless, and she sat there awkwardly. Since the beginning, Li Chen did not believe a lick of consort Ji's words. This was because Li Chen understood Jiro's nature to an immense degree. She was a person that would never let herself be truly wronged. The wrongs that she had received would be given back to the other party tenfold. Once Li Chen saw her impoverished costume and pitiful actions, his heart only felt full of helplessness. Sometimes, in the eyes of those types of women, he was merely someone unaware of the full details of a situation and unable to discern truth or lie from their words. A person not too difficult to manipulate. He just needed to listen to what they said and to act for them. That would be enough. "The princess consort should return and rest," said Li Chen. "You have already yielded the power to manage the household, so naturally you do not have to concern yourself with every matter. You are blameless here. This concubine thanks your highness for showing consideration," said Qi Nikan, sounding as if she were sobbing through her words. Patting her hand once, Li Chen called for someone to send her back to Winter Plum Courtyard. After a while, Su Ji rushed over. His words were soft. "Your highness, the things that are to be rewarded to consort Ji." Li Chen calmly said, "Reward them." "Yes, this slave will do as commanded." It were as if Qi Yunruo had fallen into a dream of long ago. All of a sudden, he wasn't sure of the day, only that he had just entered Count Xiang's estate. At King Zi Street, he had been a little master. The servants dared not say anything inappropriate in his presence. Yet once he had stepped foot into Count Xiang's estate, he learned of a new word: prostitute. The most despised type of woman. Little Yunruo sobbed as he asked, "Where is older sister Yuan Yuan?" To which Nanny Kong, the old servant in charge of taking care of him, coldly replied, "The mistress has sold her." Little Yunruo's sobs grew louder and more pitiful. "Why? I want older sister Yuan to feed me. I want older sister Yuan to help me put on my clothes. I want older sister Yuan." Nanny Kong slammed the bowl on the table. A frown slid across her face. Who would care if a maidservant of a prostitute was dead or alive? Once that woman died, the mistress sold all of those people to the human brokers. They've been sold to the coldest and most impoverished regions in the West. For the rest of their lives, they will never be able to return. Little Yunruo sat there, shocked. Never return? Like how mother can never return. Nanny Kong hated it the most when Chi Yunruo mentioned his mother. The veins of her forehead bulged as she glared at him, and she took her time speaking, enunciating each word to the fullest. "Do not mention that prostitute in our household again." It frightened little Yunruo to the point where he couldn't even cry. He held in his sobs as he ate. The new environment was terrifying to him. There was no mother, there was no older sister Yuan, and there was no older brother Cheng who would carry him on his back as he ran. Nanny Kong left him alone to cry. Waited until his cries finally ceased. He didn't know how much time had passed. However, little Yunruo quickly understood that crying would solve nothing. From observing the eyes of those around him, he learned that they felt repulsed by him. And his father never came to visit, not even once. Unlike how the man had at least made some effort back at King's Street. Eventually, little Yunruo gave up on him. Chi Yunruo stood behind little Yunruo. Watched as he grew older a little at a time. He lived in the outermost part of the estate. He was no longer like how he had been before turning 7 years old, able to fly a kite freely or see a gentle woman smiling at him as he jumped into her arms. No longer could he lift his head and ask with eyes sparkling with hope, "When will father return?" Chi Yunruo opened his eyes. He was unsure how many layers of blankets were currently covering his body. He did not even have the strength to lift them. "You're awake." A hand reached over. The owner of the voice spoke softly and slowly, and touched his forehead. "You are sweating." Chi Yunruo fought to keep his eyes open longer, before closing them again. After a moment, he opened them once more. And then closed them. Dawn had already arrived. Li Chen rose from the bed and put on his outer robes. He called for someone. Lulan, who had stayed awake overnight, rushed over. Li Chen ordered, after a moment, "Ask Physician Lu what your master is allowed to eat. And whether he is allowed to have his sweat wiped clean." "Understood, this maidservant will do as ordered." Li Chen turned around, his gaze falling upon Chi Yunruo. Then he left Lakeside View House to attend morning court. Chi Yunruo's illness left as quickly as it came. Once his high fever subsided, Physician Lu said, "This young master's body is too weak. He needs to eat many nourishing things to supplement for this." Then Lulan sent off Physician Lu. Suji had already arranged for people to send over bird's nest and ginseng, 2 highly nourishing food items. While Li Yisu helped Chi Yunruo put on his outer robes and supported him outside the inner chamber to sit while 2 low-ranked servant girls made his bed. Chi Yunruo's hair was let down. His head throbbed with pain. Li Yisu presented him with a cup of water as he asked, "What happened yesterday?" A soft sigh escaped Li Yisu's lips. "Master suddenly fainted and scared us all to death." Once Xiao Shan and Xiao Ju had finished making the bed, they asked if he wanted to lie down. Chi Yunruo nodded, his exhaustion apparent. He relied on their support to reach the bed. As he waited for the medicine to arrive, 2 pillows were placed at the front of the bed to support his back. He had no appetite. There was still some lotus porridge left over, so he forced himself to eat some before taking the bitter medicine. Afterward, Chi Yunruo felt nauseous. It wasn't until he ate 2 pickled plums that he felt better. In the afternoon, Ji Huan came to visit. For the past couple of days, he had been packing his things and studying. As such, he had been absolutely clueless about the recent situation. The only reason he found out was because Yuè Hóu had heard it from others during some errands. That during yesterday morning, Frost Autumn Courtyard's eunuchia had a gushing wound on his forehead after leaving Lakeside View House. Then in the evening, he was punished with the rod and thrown out of the estate to a temple, the rest of his life to be spent feeding horses. Ji Huan almost jumped from fear after hearing all of this, and rushed to see Qi Yunruo. Qi Yunruo had slept until noon. After he woke up, he sat in bed as he read. Ji Huan had just arrived, and once he caught sight of his pale face, his heart chilled in an instant. Qi Yunruo smiled brightly. "Older brother Ji is here." Ji Huan sighed. "I've not seen you for only a couple days, and you're already looking like this." But Qi Yunruo only reached out to hold his hand. "When are you leaving, brother?" "In a few days. My father was recently promoted to the Minister of War, so I'll be going to visit him soon." Following a moment of thought, Qi Yunruo said, "The position of Minister of War is high. Older brother Ji will be taking the exams next year, so it will be helpful to your father." Ji Huan laughed bitterly. "Little Qi, I know a bit about the circumstances at Count Xiang's estate. My legitimate mother is the daughter of my father's teacher during his years at the academy. My father was a poor scholar. If it weren't for his teacher's assistance, he would not have what he has today. Back then, my legitimate mother was unable to conceive for 5 years. Therefore, my father took in my birth mother as a concubine. Who knew that later on, after my birth mother had just given birth to me, my legitimate mother would conceive Jiro. A year after Jiro was born, she gave birth to a son, and a year after that, she gave birth to another one. And my legitimate mother saw me as an eyesore. My father felt so sorry for her and truly loved his legitimate sons. Therefore, he was quite lackluster in his affection for me, and didn't really care about me. I had to protect my birth mother and also study. Unfortunately, my birth mother suddenly died. After that, I swore I would not care what path I took as long as I would stand above others. A person above most people. Before I met you, I wondered if you had the ability to seduce the prince. If so, I would be on guard against you. Who would have known that once I saw you, I would like you so very much? It was like seeing my previous self. I really see you as my blood brother. And I am truly afraid that once I leave, you'll look like how you appear now, tired, pale, and ill." As Qi Yunruo listened to Ji Huan's words, he felt tears form at the corners of his eyes. "I never knew that brother's heart held so many depressing things." Ji Huan smiled a little. "I have stopped feeling depressed about it since long ago. Next year, I will definitely be the top exam taker. And from then on, my future will be boundless. However, I cannot stop worrying about you. You belong to the prince's estate and the prince will not let you go. For the rest of your life, you will have to stay here, and you cannot win against those women." Back then, brother had asked me why I did not want to, with his highness. Qi Yunruo paused, his voice bitter. "I've never told brother this, but I had actually been terrified. I was terrified that I would become just like my birth mother, locking herself in her heart in a small house just for the sake of one man, and forcing her to a death." Reaching out, Ji Huan stroked his head. "Brother needn't feel worried," said Qi Yunruo. "I know now that I will not become like my mother. Actually, I'm really smart. I understand who truly treats me well and who doesn't like me." Ji Huan's eyes held a trace of a smile. However, there was still a deep worry etched within them. "Little Qi, Consort Ji already hates you. Currently, her status has grown even higher due to our father's promotion. The prince won't touch her for this reason. You must take caution and protect yourself." "I know, brother Ji." Qi Yunruo leaned toward Ji Huan and wrapped his arms around him, squeezing tight once. A few days later, when Ji Huan was scheduled to depart, Ji Yunruo's body had recovered enough. Ji Huan disguised himself and left the city. After staying outside the city for 2 days, he went back into the city and returned to his home estate. He had left through the corner door that Ji Yunruo had used to first enter the prince's estate. Ji Huan had worn clothes of the common folk and carried his luggage. He only brought a page named Qing Xing. They had quietly used a horse-drawn carriage meant for servants to leave. Li Chen had not been off duty. By the time he had returned to the estate, beautiful forest was already empty. All of a sudden, he sighed deeply. He had been born with a sexual preference for men. He loved high-spirited and magnanimous men, men with open minds. And he liked to talk to people like Ji Huan, who were very knowledgeable and learned. Li Chen wanted someone who could both be a close friend and his intimate lover. It was a pity Ji Huan could not be such a person. He had too much ambition. He had a long-cherished wish he must fulfill and would not be willing to stay by a man's side. Li Chen had known this from the beginning. As such, he hadn't let himself be too invested emotionally, though his heart did feel disappointed. The princess consort had to wait after the new year to give birth. Currently, little Qi was still managing the estate. Li Chen had thought little Qi would have been frightened by the previous event, and would yield the stewardship after recovering from his illness. Yet when he woke up, he acted as though the previous event had never occurred. He went back to managing the accounts naturally. He also went and discussed with Su Ji about the matters regarding Li Chen's birthday celebration. In the end, the two decided to invite the 6 imperial princes and their families. Apart from them, of the high-ranking officials, they only invited the in-laws, such as Count Xiang and his family and the Minister of War, Ji Hansong, and his family. There was also the Wei family of the Imperial Academy's sacrificial wine specialist. The celebration was treated as just a family gathering, so there were no plays and dancers hired. However, when that day arrived, the estate started receiving gifts from other people early in the morning. This part was not to be managed by Qi Yunruo. He just needed to keep an eye on the kitchens and the servants. Once Li Chen arrived at the estate after attending morning court, a pair of jade ruyi bestowed by the emperor and a jade crown bestowed by the empress had been delivered. Qi Nikan stuck out her large abdomen as she walked. Countess Xiang accompanied her. The two of them discussed the events that had occurred the previous month. After Qi Nikan had slowly finished relaying the news, she said, "Basically, Consort Ji was trying to start trouble for me." Countess Xiang smiled coldly. Did she think since her family was able to produce a minister that she could reach the heavens? Her grandfather is only a farmer. Qi Nikan shifted her gaze to her abdomen, a light sigh leaving her lips. Hopefully this child will be male. Definitely so. I've said it from the beginning, darling Kun is blessed. Qi Dangxia had already been married for several months and has still not gotten pregnant. As soon as she said this, Li Yubai came to the door. Your Highness, the princess consort, and mistress. The mistresses of the Ji and Wei families have arrived. End chapter. Fpyq Jiang. Chapter 16. Drinking wine from a flowing river. Mistress Ji was born from a literary family. In the past, her father placed first in the imperial exams. Later on, he became the imperial censorate deputy. He was currently the Grand Secretary of Hanlin Academy. Among the literary crowd, he stood clear and bright, a righteous individual. Mistress Wei's husband was the Imperial Academy's sacrificial wine specialist. Her own birth, however, wasn't too noble. She had married sacrificial wine specialist Wei before he held this title. After many years, the two still shared a harmonious marriage. There were no concubines in their household. Compared to the countess, the two other mistresses possessed a lower status. In the past, they had no connection. For this reason, they courteously greeted each other. The countess said, "The two of you need not be so polite. Please take a seat." Mistress Ji smiled. As her gaze fell upon Qi Nikan's abdomen, she said, Your Highness, the Princess Consort, is a fortunate person. I've talked to my husband and we agree that darling Ro is unreasonable. We have spoiled her. Thank goodness that your Highness is genial, that we can be relieved. Mistress Wei's temperament and demeanor were not as refined as those of Mistress Ji. Your Highness is a kind mistress of the household. Chi Nikan had someone bring the 2 secondary consorts, so that they could meet their mothers. Once secondary consort Ji saw her mother, her eyes held back tears. Mistress Ji sighed lightly. She held her daughter's hand without saying a word. However, Mistress Wei did not seem too close to her daughter. Her expression was awkward and she seemed a little stiff. Shortly after, Consort Ji and Consort Wei paid respects to Chi Nikan and Countess Xiang. Then Chi Nikan told them to bring their mothers to her residence. They could chat there until the banquet started. Consort Ji and Mistress Ji left together. Consort Wei also brought Mistress Wei away. Once they were gone, the Countess said, that Consort Wei's pregnancy. Mother, don't say that I am petty. But I really wish that for the next few years, the secondary and tertiary consorts would all give birth to daughters. I would dote on them. Then once my son is older. The Countess patted her hand. You've thought of it well. It had been a while since Consort Ji and her mother met in person. Tears glistened in their eyes, bright like jewels. However, when Mistress Ji mentioned Ji Huan, her expression immediately changed. Consort Ji coldly said, back then, we tried to subdue his drive. So that he could help me. In the end, the prince liked him a lot. From then on, his future will be boundless. Mistress Ji said, the one I hate is your father. He actually allowed him to take the imperial exams next year. What about my 2 younger brothers? A sigh escaped Mistress Ji's lips. Your father graduated from the academy and your maternal grandfather had been the #1 exam taker in his time. Nowadays, he is the Grand Secretary of Hanlin Academy. Why are those 2 cheap spawns so terrible with their studies? To pacify her mother, Consort Ji said, my younger brothers are still young. They aren't sensible yet. Mistress Ji sighed. When Ji Huan was 10 years old, he had already been renowned. At 15, he took the city examinations and qualified as a jurin. Your younger brothers couldn't even pass the rural examinations at 17 and 15 years old. Mother, have you looked for a matchmaker for my younger brothers yet? Your father said that men must have their career before marrying. He wants your younger brothers to pass the exams before bringing home their brides. Also, your father said that Ji Huan must get married first. All of a sudden, Consort Ji's heart tightened. Did her father only want to invest in Ji Huan? Consort Wei called little Chiao to serve her mother tea. She sat at the side and watched. Consort Wei sat uncomfortably. It wasn't until a while later that she smiled. Darling Jiang's pregnant figure is not bad. Consort Wei lightly grunted in acknowledgement. Mistress Wei summoned her courage. She loudly said, I know darling Jiang is upset about me and your father. However, your father chose the best prince estate for you. This isn't just any prince estate. This prince is of the legitimate line. His age is suitable, and he is handsome and talented. What are you so unsatisfied about? Mother is asking what I'm unsatisfied about. Consort Wei said. I've told you from the start that I would rather be the principal wife of a poor man than the concubine of a rich one. But you and father still put me in this situation. Because His Majesty wanted to give the prince a secondary consort born from a literary family, you quickly handed me over on a silver platter. I didn't know anything about it at all. I was sent to the prince estate just like that. As soon as she heard those words, Mistress Wei's expression reddened completely. Look at how you're passing your days now. You're swimming in wealth. Tens of people attend to you. And now, you're even with child. If it's a boy, you'll have someone to support you for the rest of your life. Although your father is a third-rank official, unfortunately he does not have much connections or support. Would there be any decent households that would propose to our household? I won't be able to accept letting you marry into a small family. Consort Yuè's gaze fell upon her mother. Stayed there for a period. Then she said in a neutral tone, "It doesn't matter anymore. What you both cannot give me, I'll take with my own hands." The banquet went on in a normal fashion. Once everything had been prepared, Chi Yunruo returned to Lakeside View House for his afternoon meal. The kitchens of the forecourt and inner courtyard were busily preparing for the event. He only asked for one dish to go with his rice. Afterward, he snacked on a plate of cured meat the kitchens had sent, smiles so full of joy that his eyes resembled crescents. A while later, he turned to Lulan. "Is there any of Brother G's osmanthus wine left?" Following a moment of thought, Lulan said, "Yes. Should I bring young master a warm jar?" "It's fine not to warm it. This type of wine tastes great even when chilled." Shortly after, Lulan delivered a jar of osmanthus wine to Lakeside View House. Chi Yunruo drank as he ate the cured meat, finding the combination delicious. Osmanthus wine was unlikely to make one intoxicated, however each time he indulged in some, he would require a short nap. Puzzled by her master's happy expression, Lulan asked by his side, "What is causing young master so much joy?" A smile blossomed on Chi Yunruo's lips. "Nothing much. I'm just happy to have accomplished this task. Whenever I think of it, I feel satisfied. Young master is an open-minded person." After he drank half the jar of wine and ate more than 10 pieces of cured meat, his vision started to grow blurry. For this reason, when Li Chen appeared in front of Chi Yunruo, he did not recognize him. Li Chen noticed the red on his cheeks, the piece of cured meat still held in Chi Yunruo's hand. He couldn't help but smile at the sight. A moment later, Chi Yunruo finally realized Li Chen's presence. "Your Highness, why did your honored self come here?" "To see you." After 3 rounds of drinks at the forecourt's banquet, Li Chen rose to his feet and made for the inner court, in order to share a drink with his female guests. At Winter Plum Courtyard, apart from his princess consort and secondary consorts, there were only their birth mothers present. As such, the meeting wasn't taboo. Later, Li Chen made for Falling Cloud Courtyard to share a drink with the tertiary consorts and lower-ranked concubines. Then he slowly made his way back to the forecourt. He drank a lot of alcohol. His brothers had pressured him to keep drinking, and he also downed several drinks in the inner courtyard. The moisture from the lake cooled him down, and he followed the path of the water, one slow step at a time, until Lakeside View House came into view. From his time entertaining guests in the forecourt and inner courtyard, he had yet to catch a glimpse of Chi Yunruo. The moment Li Chen arrived at Lakeside View House, his heart suddenly tightened. Never had he thought Chi Yunruo would be drinking so merrily by himself. For some inexplicable reason, he really wanted to know the reason for his smile. He wanted to smile with him. Chi Yunruo indeed seemed very happy while drinking. His chopsticks had been set aside, and he was using his hands to eat the meat. Li Chen stood by his side. Reached out to pick up a piece of cured meat and placed it in his mouth. Chi Yunruo's eyes flashed bright as he stared at Li Chen, and the older male found the sight funny. The meat was a bit on the salty side, yet fragrant to a high degree. He took a sip of Chi Yunruo's wine and couldn't help but say, "Not bad at all. Isn't it?" In the past, Brother Ji always paired delicious side dishes with this wine. But I think pairing it with salted meat is the best. Ji Huan has now entered the Imperial Academy, said Li Chen. Brother Ji will definitely pass the Imperial examinations next year. Li Chen smiled. Then he drank another cup of osmanthus wine. Shortly after, Lulan arrived. She said to Li Chen, "Your Highness, Eunuch Suji is looking for your honored self in the forecourt." Shocked, Li Chen finally recalled that it was his birthday today. He was the protagonist in the forecourt. Chi Yunruo said, "Your honored self should hurry and leave." With that, Li Chen rose to his feet and grunted in acknowledgement. Qi Yunruo also stood. He swayed as he sent off Li Chen at the entrance. After a moment of thought, he said, "Your Highness, I wish your honored self a bright and boundless future, that every year would be blessed with good fortune." Li Chen smiled and nodded. "I will take your blessings." Once Li Chen returned to the forecourt, an ill-intentioned smile slid across Prince Qing's lips. "Second brother, who enchanted you to stay at her side for so long?" But Li Chen only smiled, shaking his head. "After you all made me drink so much, I had a hard time finding my way back." "Second brother has a high alcohol tolerance," said Prince Jing, smiling. "Today is supposed to be a joyous event. Even if one doesn't get drunk on alcohol, one would still feel drunk. Come, have another cup." Li Chen smiled bitterly. He turned to Li Su, his full-blooded brother, who was standing by his side. "Come, drink a cup for your second brother." After the two shared a smile, Li Su said, "Eldest brother shouldn't bully second brother anymore. During your birthday celebration, we didn't push you to drink so much." The group of younger princes were drinking fruit wine. It was hard to get drunk from it. One side was full of loud chatter and of the other relatives, Count Xiang had the highest status. Then came the Minister of War and the head of the Imperial Academy. Because of this, both Prince Jing and Prince Qing felt despondent when thinking about the status of their own in-laws. Once they had drank to the point of near intoxication, Prince Qing said, "With no plays or dancers hired, it's indeed a bit boring. How about we play the pitch-pot game?" "Without any music, you can't," said Li Chen. "Suji, bring my qin." As Suji went to find the qin, Prince Qing's eyes darted left and right. Pretending to be angry, he said, "Second brother surely is sly. While we gamble, you will sit out to play the qin." Li Chen laughed. "Today, my brother-in-laws from Count Xiang's estate are present. The two are skilled in both the pen and sword and can take my place. Now that I'm this drunk, I'll be even more intoxicated if I keep drinking." Qi Yunchen and Qi Yunying did not dare to compete with the princes. However, when it came to playing games, no matter how easy they went on Prince Jing and Prince Qing, their skill was still higher. The more Prince Qing lost, the more he wanted to play. He downed one cup after the other. On the other hand, Prince Jing was already at the point where he couldn't endure it anymore. Li Chen sat at the side as he played Liu's Hang. After 2 songs, everyone at the table was almost drunk to oblivion. Come noon, the younger princes returned to the imperial palace. Prince Jing and Prince Qing were sent to their own estates. Fatigued, Li Chen started a conversation with Count Xiang. Count Xiang said, "That second son of mine had a pleasant time. Ah, he's not sensible at all. If it weren't for my brother-in-law's help, I would have had a hard time today." Count Xiang wasn't actually complaining about his second son. His second son was strapping, hitting 100 marks out of 100. He felt proud of Qi Yunying. "The princess consort's side has withheld from liquor," said Li Chen. "Perhaps they have already finished and packed up. However, the princess consort has not seen her mother for a long time. Father-in-law should give them some more time to chat." Count Xiang smiled. "Then this official will bother your honored self by staying longer." At noon, Qi Yunruo finally woke from his nap and went to the forecourt to help with organizing the birthday gifts. He separated them by category. Some of them needed to be sent to Qi Nikan's storeroom in the inner courtyard. Currently, Qi Yunruo was following Suji's assistant, eunuch Feng Yuan. Feng Yuan recorded the items as he said, "Every year, the number of gifts received increases." Eyes flashing with curiosity, Qi Yunruo asked, "Why is this so?" Feng Yuan sent him a sideways glance. "Even if I told you, you wouldn't understand." Qi Yunruo wasn't upset by what he had said. Feng Yuan's words were a bit acrimonious, but he was nimble with his work. Furthermore, he was not mean to others. The moment Qi Yunruo laid eyes on the list of birthday gifts sent from Count Xiang's estate, his jaw dropped. Seeing his expression, Feng Yuan approached him. In your opinion, how much money does Count Xiang's estate have? The princess consort had 128 crates of dowry. The second miss had 80 crates. Although the two young masters have yet to marry, they still sent so many gifts for His Highness' birthday celebration. He clicked his tongue. Really lavish. Not a word left Qi Yunruo's lips. Feng Yuan smiled. A few days ago I heard that a servant in Count Xiang's estate brought some trouble. He was the son of a female steward, and she begged the count to let her son go. She then became a merchant. In the end, she lost in profit. The person she lost money to had been deceitful. They said they were running errands for the count estate and tricked her out of a lot of money before dashing off. Qi Yunruo did not know about the circumstances at Count Xiang's estate. He also did not know the identity of the female steward, for he did not pay attention to such things. Count Xiang's household is one of the few noble families still remaining from the start of the dynasty. It hasn't dropped in noble rank yet, Feng Yuan said, lamenting. Qi Yunruo said, in the past, they held an army. That family has lost many people to the battlefield across many generations. This generation will have it hard, said Feng Yuan. To those words, Qi Yunruo did not express an opinion. He went to move some items, and after a while, everything was organized. Then Feng Yuan told him to take a break. If eunuch Suji saw me working you to death, wouldn't he beat me up? Qi Yunruo broke into a smile. Eunuch Suji has a good temper. He isn't like that to us. Rubbing his hands, Qi Yunruo left the storeroom. When he was about to pass by Ink Lotus Courtyard, he caught sight of Qi Yunshan not too far away. Qi Yunshan was trying to sober up outside. The moment he saw Qi Yunruo, he stood there shocked. The siblings shared a look in silence. A beat later, Qi Yunruo tried to pass by him, continuing on his own path. But Qi Yunshan moved to block his way. What are you doing? Not wanting to speak, Qi Yunruo took a few steps to the side, before trying to leave again. This time, Qi Yunshan did not move to obstruct his path. Meanwhile, because Qi Yunying wasn't as good as other people in holding his liquor, he did not see clearly who stood before him. Not only that, but Qi Yunruo had lowered his head as his pace quickened, which resulted in Qi Yunruo bumping into his large and tall second brother, falling to the ground without a word. End chapter. Fpyq Jiang. Chapter 17. Sealed by ice. Qi Yunruo rose to his feet and patted his clothes of dust. Rubbing his forehead, Qi Yunying said, I couldn't see the path clearly. Sorry. To which Qi Yunruo merely shook his head. Although Suji had heard the commotion, as he was standing far away, he could not discern what had been said. Returning inside, Suji turned to Li Chen. The three young masters of Count Xiang's estate are conversing. It's cold out there. Tell them to come back inside, Li Chen said casually. Originally, Qi Yunruo was about to make his leave. But as soon as he heard Suji's invitation, he went over a bit unhappily, taking his time to do so. He and his brothers did not speak a single word. Once Li Chen saw them, he realized his mistake. Qi Yunruo's unwillingness was clear on his face. Count Xiang coughed once. Child, I haven't seen you in a while. Recently, Qi Yunruo's joy had been hard to ignore, yet now he was sitting without a word. The awkwardness that Count Xiang felt increased. He gestured for his two sons to break the ice. Suji quickly understood the situation. He broke into a smile. Young Master Xiao Qi, are you assisting Feng Yuan? Yes. Suji said to Li Chen, Your Highness may not know, but young Master Xiao Qi is very patient and has beautiful calligraphy. These days, he helps Feng Yuan in the storeroom. It must have been hard for little Qi, said Li Chen. Did you see anything you like among the gifts sent today? A moment of thought. I really liked the set of 7 crystal cups of varying sizes. Li Chen glanced at Suji. With a nod, Suji said, in a little while, this slave will have the storeroom send them to young Master Qi. Shortly after, Li Chen shifted his gaze to Qi Yunruo. It seems little Qi has grown taller. Back then, you were much shorter than your brothers. Now the difference in heights has decreased. I have been eating well these days. Meanwhile, Qi Yunshan watched as Li Chen and Qi Yunruo conversed, one asking a question and one answering. They seemed to get along well. Something Qi Yunshan would be lying to say he approved. On the other hand, Qi Yunying wore a neutral expression. The sky grew darker. Countess Xiang prepared to leave. This time, when Qi Yunruo caught sight of her, Countess Xiang was shocked at first. Then her expression darkened. Qi Yunruo lowered his head and softly yawned. The countess said, after staying at the prince estate for so long, you still don't follow protocol. Your legitimate mother is standing right in front of you, yet you act in such a manner. It were as if frost had grown around Qi Yunruo, layer upon layer covering every inch of his body. He kept quiet. Seeing this, Count Xiang acted as the mediator. My lady, do not blame him. Little Qi has always been quiet. The countess smiled. So it was like that. I almost thought that since third young master is managing the estate and very capable, you won't put anyone in your eyes. Such words caused a slight furrow of Li Chen's brows. Was the countess' words meant for him? At this point, Qi Yunruo resembled a quail covered by frost, shrunk into a ball at the side. Countess Xiang's heart burned with fury. But she didn't have the right to say anything more. With a toss of her sleeve, she left. Count Xiang and the others followed her out. All of a sudden, a smile graced Qi Yunruo's lips. Realization struck Li Chen like lightning. Then he couldn't help but smile as well. He studied Qi Yunruo, eyes bright with curiosity. Today, Qi Yunruo seemed in good spirits for no apparent reason. Previously, the autumn allotment caused many issues. Now, the time to make the winter season's clothes drew near. As Qi Yunruo discussed with the servants of the textile workshop, one of the staff, Nanny Yu, looked up at him with a complicated expression. The mess from before was mostly caused by the textile workshop. They had serviced people according to position instead of rank, causing Consort Ji's ego to swell. Later, when they had made her clothes according to her actual rank, Consort Ji sent people to throw a fuss at Lakeside View House. Young Master Xiao Qi grew very ill due to this. Because no one dared to ask what had truly happened, Nanny Yu had not been able to relax until now. The winter chill has arrived earlier this year, Qi Yunruo said. For the next few days, Nanny Yu should find more people for assistance. Make the more important clothes first. Add a rabbit fur cloak for Consort Wei. And a fox pelt short coat, too. Eldest miss and eldest young master must also have their clothes quickly made. The children must not get cold. Understood. This slave will remember. With that, he continued to watch them work. Nanny Yu smiled and said, Young master only remembers what other people need but forgets about your honored self. Does your honored self not want a large fur coat this year? After a moment of thought, Qi Yunruo broke into a smile. What you've said makes sense. What style do you think will look best on me? Nanny Yu breathed out a sigh of relief. Once again, a smile lit up her face. Young master has such pale skin. Any color will suit your honored self, and so will any material. This mink pelt will not go well with just anyone. It will look best on your honored self. Qi Yunruo nodded. After he finished writing the records, he said, Have someone retrieve the items from the storeroom. Yes. Following that, the crafting department sent a few samples of new jewelry for Qi Yunruo to examine. However, he was not knowledgeable of such things nor did he have an eye for them. As such, Qi Yunruo had people send them to the other residences for the other masters to choose. The servants of the crafting department also sent a drawing of hollow golden crown. One glance, and Qi Yunruo knew it was meant for him. A small Yun character was engraved on the side, and the little crown did not use much gold. A single sapphire glistened. However, it required a lot of human labor to make. Just to melt the materials and to form the shape one layer at a time should have taken at least half a month. Although Qi Yunruo was unwilling to use the crown, Lulan tried to convince him otherwise. Once a man reaches 15 years of age, he should wear a crown. This slave can tell that the crown is light. Wearing it won't weigh down the hair. Young master does not yet have an attractive headdress. Qi Yunruo smiled. I'm not a woman. What would I do with so much jewelry? Yet Lulan did not respond to his question. She merely flashed a smile as she turned to the older female servant who was waiting on their confirmation. Then let's go with what seamstress Lu says. If it's done well, our young master will reward you. During the coldest part of the year, General Situ had already reached the front lines and started battle. The Ministry of War and Ministry of Revenue became extremely busy. Even Li Chen, who was the supervisor of the Ministry of Revenue, had not returned home for several days. The Ministry of Revenue managed the nation's taxes and food. Along with the Ministry of War, they arranged the military rations and various necessities for the families of the generals and the troops. Li Chen did not stop worrying about the battle at the border. But he did not have the clearance to go himself, and could only work his hardest in the capital. Many years ago, the Qiang people forcibly occupied the west. In the recent years, they had gradually moved toward the north. In the north, there was an oasis where the country of Xinyuan stood, and this country had many relations with the Qiang people. It was mostly due to the fact that they shared a common enemy. The Qiang people originally had split into many smaller subsidiary tribes, and some of these tribes were antagonistic toward the Qiang people. Their language had also differed over the years, which made communication difficult. However, every couple of years, they would support the Ganzuaguermu. And they would gather and attack the country of the Li clan. Ganzuaguermu would select beauties from every subsidiary tribe as his concubines. Most of the time, they were the daughters of the tribe leaders. His principal wife, maiden name Yan, was the eldest legitimate daughter of the leader of the most powerful faction of tribes under the Qiang people. There existed no issue with the production and delivery of the winter clothes. What caused Qi Yunruo a throbbing headache, however, was the fact that preparation for the New Year's allotment had already started. Qi Yunruo closed his eyes as he rubbed his temples. Would Li Chen's yearly salary be enough to support the massive spending in the inner courtyard? In the past, there had not been a female master of the estate. For this reason, Li Chen only needed to arrange social events with male guests and did not need to deal with womenfolk. This year, since there was a princess consort in their estate also must entertain the womenfolk and send them gifts. In fact, now that Prince Qing had just gotten married, their household must send an even larger amount of gifts. As Qi Yunruo dealt with his headache, Li Chen returned to the estate. Qi Nikan's pregnancy was more conspicuous than ever. The estate had summoned a few midwives a while ago. And also several female physicians and 4 nursemaids. With such cold weather, Qi Nikan occasionally strolled within her residence but did not go outside. This was to be her first time giving birth and she took this very seriously. There could not be any mistakes. Meanwhile, Qi Yunruo and Suji discussed the New Year gifts for the other princes' households with Li Chen. And also the gifts for the imperial concubines. Under the strain of his heavy workload, Li Chen grew a scruffy beard. A moment later, he said, "This year, I married the princess consort. Originally, she should be the one managing these things. It has been hard for little Qi." Yet Qi Yunruo only smiled. "It's all right. Regarding the New Year gifts, the prince estate gave a few relative to how much they received in return. It's just that the gifts to be sent to the imperial palace took a lot of consideration." Qi Yunruo said, eunuch Suji and I have already prepared the gifts meant for His Majesty and the Empress. However, for the Empress Dowager. Li Chen took his time saying, every year, it is this prince who personally prepares the Empress Dowager's gifts. To which Suji quickly said, it is this slave that failed to explain it clearly to young Master Xiao Qi. The Empress Dowager raised His Highness. Every year His Highness would copy a roll of Buddhist scriptures. Nothing else is sent. Qi Yunruo stood there, shocked. He had not seen this in the records and troubled himself thinking there had been some sort of mistake, adding to his already intense headache. The moment he made to leave, Li Chen did not say anything. However, once he left, Li Chen shook his head with a bitter smile. Why was little Qi venting his anger at Li Chen's circumstances? Qi Yunruo took his time returning to his residence, thoughts wandering the universe. The Empress Dowager had raised His Highness and the princess. 6 years ago, the princess married the Gongju of the Qiang people, a Gu'er Mu. 1 year later, the Empress Dowager sealed her palace, never again meeting guests. Nothing else was known about it. A gust of wind brought a thick flurry of snow over. Qi Yunruo lifted his head to admire the sight, heart beating with joy as he stopped in his tracks. Young Master Qi! Young Master Qi, your clothes! Turning around to the direction of the voice, Qi Yunruo caught sight of a low-ranking eunuch sprinting over with mink pelt cloak in his arms. He waited for the eunuch to arrive. And he also saw that Li Chen had left the comfort of his chambers. Qi Yunruo draped the cloak over his shoulders, gazing at Li Chen from afar. Li Chen had not worn a cloak. Suji followed him holding an umbrella. There was also a low-ranking eunuch behind him, a black fox pelt fur collar cloak held tight in his arms. Li Chen made his way to Qi Yunruo's side. Come with me. All right. With a wave of a hand, Li Chen dismissed Suji. Your Highness should just wear the fox pelt fur collar cloak, said Qi Yunruo. It's very cold out here. Don't catch a cold. Light laughter tumbled out of Li Chen's lips. There's no need to cover up so much for just a stroll outside. Taking the fur collar cloak from the low-ranking eunuch's hands, Qi Yunruo stood on his toes and draped it over Li Chen's shoulders. It's better not to get sick. Li Chen declined to comment on that. Rather, he merely told Qi Yunruo to follow him, and the latter did so without a sound. He did not speak until they reached the watery corridor. This was where I first saw you. Li Chen's eyes were covered in a hint of haze. Qi Yunruo stared at the frozen lake's surface. He smiled. I wonder if I can walk over it right now. Li Chen also smiled, albeit lightly. It's better not to try. As the two of them walked the corridor, snow fell upon them, white powder catching on the dark of their hair. Qi Yunruo said, if the corridor freezes, it'll be dangerous to walk on. A while later, Li Chen broke the silence. This year I fear I won't have time to copy Buddhist scriptures for the Empress Dowager. Is it because of what's happening in the West? Every day, I discuss those matters with the Ministry of War, said Li Chen. And every day, we receive the reports of those who fell in battle. My heart cannot stay calm, and as such I will not do a decent job in copying scriptures. Smile dancing on his lips, Qi Yunruo said, even so, Your Highness' intentions will reach Her Majesty, the Empress Dowager. Li Chen shook his head. And sighed. Grandmother and I have not met for many years. Not a word left Qi Yunruo's lips. At that moment, he did not know what to say. Li Chen's face was the picture of sadness. Qi Yunruo tilted his head as he stared at him. From the warmth and protection of his large cloak came a hand, reaching out to hold Li Chen's own. Your Highness, I am a person with a weak affinity for familial bonds. Your parents and elders are still around. Why Her Majesty, the Empress Dowager, does not meet you, I am unsure. However, Her Majesty is in good health. One day, the ill feeling between you two will vanish. Li Chen took in the sight of their clasped hands. smiled and shook his head. They left the watery corridor, Qi Yunruo momentarily going ahead. As Li Chen watched him, he said, "You've really grown taller. Last time, I couldn't tell for sure, but today it is clear to see." Qi Yunruo smiled. He noticed that Li Chen was looking in the direction of Lakeside View House. Winter was frigid. At the side of Lakeside View House lay a field of white ice. There were a few furnaces inside, so it wasn't cold. However, when standing outside the house, looking out to the lake, the chill was more noticeable than ever. Li Chen slightly frowned. "Do you want to move again?" "No need. I think this place is the best. Although the lake is frozen over, it's nicer to look at than the bare ground." Li Chen nodded. As he walked he said, "What are little key plans for the future?" "Why is your highness asking that? You're already 16 years old. A 16 years old young man. Even if you can't forge a career for yourself, you should still be doing something." Li Chen's gaze fell upon Qi Yunruo. "Back then, have you thought about this?" The young man looked down. "In the past, no one supervised me. In my free time, I would read some books. Whatever Count Xiang gave me was what I had. No matter what, I still had to pass my days." "You did not want to come here." Li Chen's voice was light, his tone carrying his certainty of the fact. "If it were 1 year ago, I would not dare to say. Even if I had said something, it would be of no use. Due to my birth, I cannot be picky. But a few months ago, after your highness and her highness let me manage the estate temporarily, I experienced many things. And I've learned to accept what I couldn't in the past." Li Chen stopped in his tracks, his expression that of unspeakable surprise. "Accept?" End chapter.